champ is here.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble.
The champ is here. I must be the greatest. The champ is here.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people.
The champ is here.
I will not lose.
I'm a bad man. I took up the world.
Yes, welcome. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you are here with we. My name is EJ, and I got my man,
MH.
Yes, he's the DB of the show, and we are Black in Sports, giving a voice to the culture that won't shut up and dribble. Here, interviewing the best professionals in the game and in the boardroom, covering it all, laughing at it all, while providing a platform to be heard. So, you know how we do it about this time. I want to welcome our special guest today, CEO of the Global Sports Institute and the Adidas Distinguished Professor of Global Sports. Yeah, you like how I put that emphasis on that, right? At Arizona State University. His mission is to use sport to create a positive change. So please clap it up and let's welcome Kenneth Shropshire. Close, right?
Close. You dropped a couple letters. That's all right.
Hey, how we start this show again is we always ask our guests to give us a shoot your shot moment. So this could have been just a quick story or a time where you went for it all, you gambled on yourself. It could have been early on in your early playing days. It could have been, now in life, but just a shoot your shot moment. You could have won or you could have lost, but it was still a shoot your shot moment.
Man, I should have read the show notes. I thought about this a little bit. You know what? I mean, it's not even sports related so much. It was a move to Philadelphia about 35 years ago. I've been basically an LA guy and had an opportunity to go to Philly to University of Pennsylvania to be a professor. And I'd been out of law school for 7 years, kind of late in the game to change careers. I had been rejected by Penn Law School earlier in life. And this opportunity came up. So I said, let me try it for a couple of years. And it ended up being 32 years. I'm the guy that said he would never leave LA.
There you go.
Never say never. Yeah. Mr. Kane, where did your love for sports start? Look at you, mate. You're not going to try the last name. So you see, but you're still going to put Mr. on there. I'm going to put Mr. I'm going to be respectful. I'll put your names too. I know where my easy wins are. So. You know what? I like so many folks. I had an older brother, 3 years older, and sports was always part of the house. And we grew up playing all the time. I can't, somebody asked me the other day, and I think I always wanted to be a professional athlete. That was started early on in life. I was blessed to have both parents in the house. My father was actually the doctor, one of the doctors in South Central LA. So we were in the community, but we were never, financially in any bad shape anyway. If you would move to another neighborhood and got some other situations, we might have more money, but he kept us there in a way that I appreciate looking back on. But sports was always there. It was and I was fortunate enough to be okay. I ended up with a football scholarship to Stanford, and it was just something I couldn't shake. Even with what I'm doing now, man, I ended up kind of being a professor and lawyer and all this stuff in sports because I was just trying to find a way to stay involved in sports throughout. So I know you're involved with sports, a lot of sports, from volleyball to football to you name it. What were some other sports? I know football was one that you got to receive a scholarship in. What was the sports that you competed in? Well, you looking back, wasn't good at anything, but here's an odd one. We you get older, you start moving around and you offloading trophies and that sort of stuff that you got from when you were a kid. And especially when you're trying to make your kids offload their stuff. My kids are now almost 30 years old, but we're still carrying around their stuff. So at one point we were trying to get rid of everything, and I found this bowling trophy that I won, and I was actually in a bowling league at some junior high school, and I ended up in Los Angeles. So this, whenever I say I was city something, I was sixth in the city for some age group thing in bowling, and I had this. I still have the trophy. I mean, plastic with wood, but it's one of those gold painted plastic things. But that was one, and forever. And actually, when I got to Stanford, there was another brother who was a big time bowler from Oregon, and he was much better than I was. We talked about that. If we had focused on bowling, what could have happened instead of the football thing.
Now, do you get on the lanes now, or is that something that you retired? I know you still got your bag and shoes. Nobody retires them.
I don't know if you guys have been through this phase. As my brother and I were going back to clean out a parent's house and stuff. That was one of the things I was looking for. That ball with Black Beauty, I think it was Black Beauty ball with Kenny stamped on there. I had my ball with my name on it, Kenny, and I don't know where that thing is.
So getting awards and trophies all through high school. So, the famed Dorsey High School. All right.
Right.
So Hall of Fame. So did you not get it in bowling? What did you Hall of Fame for?
You know what? I say this now looking back. It's funny. And you don't spend a whole lot of time doing this. I was miscast as a center. I was you get a lot more credit for playing center now than you did then. I mean, center was then. Center, don't let anybody fool you. Centers were not calling the plays then. Centers were, the only obligation.
Not calling the coverage or the blocking scheme.
Not calling the coverage. Not who's the mic. None of that stuff was center doing then. At least they didn't have me do it. Maybe other centers were. But you just guards were calling between tackles and themselves, but not the center. And I remember I had been, as a kid, we all kind of knew what we played. I was not a quarterback. I couldn't throw, but I was always kind of a running back, or I fashioned myself as a tight end, Okay. And I remember the first day of practice, the coach said, you have long legs, go be a center. And I'm a kid saying, well, I want to play. If this is what the coach says I should play, I should play. And it turned out it was pretty good. Ended up being all league, all city, all this stuff, and got recruited by a bunch of places, and ended up going to Stanford, which, again, the real history is important. Yeah. Stanford's got this glorious kind of reputation now as this academic place with intellectual brutality for the team, the players, and kind of stuff. David Shaw talks about them. Stanford had gone to the Rose Bowl, I think the 71 and 72, the first two years in a row before I got there. So to me, it was more of a football kind of move than anything else. Mm-hmm. Again, thinking I was going to play, but I was telling my wife today, she was the more successful athlete in the family. Her, my son, my daughter too. I'm the worst athlete in the family, but that's a whole nother story too. But I had, I had thought at the time, I was really good. Now, there was no question in my mind I was going to play. And, I look back I got a picture behind me. I got a picture of kind of the other guys on our offensive line. And in the moment, this race thing is something else. And for whatever reason, and I went to all, Dorsey High School, all black high school. I end up in the group of offensive linemen, all white guys. But I knew I was going there, but I didn't think that, no, you're not, you're good enough to play. They're not letting you play because you're a brother. I mean, I didn't let myself go that far with it. Right. And I just kept going at it. And now, as I try to flash back and clean up my life and see why things didn't go the way they went, I said, there might have been something going on back then that I just really didn't want to let get in the way of what I was trying to do.
Wow. Speaking of back then and doing some research about you, and I feel very ignorant about the name change in Stanford. You mentioned that, Stanford Indians, and now we know it as Stanford Cardinals. So going through that process, tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy too, right? I mean, but in the moment, so again, through the early 70s, you guys aren't even born then. They were early 70s. It was the Stanford Indians. Yeah. And when I was being recruited, And when they were in those two Rose Bowls I mentioned, they were the Indians.
Mhm.
And, you know, whatever crazy things you have in your mind as a kid, I was like, I loved the colors, you know, the red and white. And the name I thought was you know, kind of cool. And I'd been on a little league baseball team called the Indians.
Mhm.
And then I remember the recruitment process, or somewhere along the way, the coach said, "Oh, by the way, you know, we're gonna change the name." And, you know, sidebar too, you know, Dorsey, and Dorsey still has the name, the Dorsey Dons, which is a Spanish landlord, land baron kind of person. But our mascot was a stereotypical sleepy Mexican with a sombrero, head down, that sort of thing. And, you know, at the time, here's a bunch of black guys with that logo on our helmets. Didn't think anything about it. I mean, you know, looking for the coolest version of it. You know, I want mine. And, you know, but I look back and I actually wrote about this later in life, how, you know, ignorant we were, you know, as we watched the, you know, when the Braves took the series, watching that, you know, tomahawk chop and just the name and the chanting and stuff. I mean, to me, it's cringeworthy. Sure. And I just wonder, you know, and I give myself a little credit. That's, you know, this is almost 50 years ago where I was that ignorant that I didn't realize how terrible it was. But when we got to Stanford, we were a little bit stressed that they had changed the name, and it took forever to end up with the Cardinal. There was a student vote that came up with some names that the administration didn't like, and we ended up as we are now, the color Cardinal, nothing to do with the bird, just the color.
Yeah, because you got a tree as a mascot. So
tree as a mascot. Tree, the sequoia and some other tree names were leaders in the vote count. The administration wanted to go with that. So of course the radical rebellious students just came up with that mascot.
Now, with that being your past and where you are now, which we're going to get into, do you still follow Stanford football and what they're doing up there? You know, we definitely have some ties. We had a BK, Brian Kelly, who was on the show, and his son now plays there. So shout out to Caillou Blue. Do you follow? Do you keep up with them or support or kind of?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm you know, I talk to folks there quite a bit. You know, the kind of allegiance to Stanford. The current head coach, David Shaw, his father was on the staff when I was there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the stories I tell is that we all, there were 7 or 8 black guys on the team at the time. I mean, some of them, you know, Tony Hill, James Lofton. I mean, guys that were, you know, real player, and me. There were, but we had, you know, most of the guys were quarterbacks or converted quarterbacks. Tony was a quarterback. Lofton was a quarterback in high school.
Right.
And we all got recruited by this same guy, Bill Moultrie. Guy passed away some years ago. He was I think he was Stanford's first black assistant coach, and he left. And when my class came in, there were no black coaches on the staff, which is, you know, kind of incredible to think about today. Yeah. So we did kind of multiple, you know, protests and things trying to change that. And actually, he doesn't take credit, but Ray Anderson, who's now the athletic director at Arizona State, was on that squad too, and he was kind of the leader of all that. And I'll never forget the day the administration, we did stuff like, you know, of course they would have us recruit all the, you know, black athletes.
Yeah, correct.
So we would have the guys come in, and we, you know, talk to them. So, okay, now on your exit interview with the head coach, tell them you're not going to come unless they have a black coach. What, you want me to say? What? Yeah, just say you know, want a black coach. And we did that over and over again. Guys cooperated, and we probably had the worst recruiting class ever as a result of that. But at one point, the coaches said, "Okay, stop doing that. We're going to get a coach." And next thing we knew, Willie Shaw was showed up at Ray Anderson's house, and we all met with him, and there he was. So we take credit for David Shaw. That's all I'm saying. Had it not been for our actions then, you know, David would not be there. So yeah, I'm very, you know, don't follow it as closely as I used to, and don't know as many guys as I used to, but still in touch.
Yeah, you think David Shaw is, I can't say lifer, but you think he's there for a while, or you think there's some other steps you think he makes in his career?
You know, I always think so, but you never know. And he's had a lot of money thrown at him. I'm sure that Stanford finally stepped up and did much better. And he's got I don't know where he is in the timeline of kids going to college and that sort of stuff. It's not a bad place to be, to have that connection for your kids to go to school. And you've got the model of Tyrone Willingham. If Tyrone had stayed there for life, what might his career have been like? And Tyrone's very happy guy, and did great things, and would hopefully, I don't know, probably would have been done by now, but you never know.
Yeah. So in your educational path, right? Because we're slowly moving into the great things or works that you've done. So economics degree, and then went on to be a lawyer. So what was the path? What was the thought process on getting your education and what you initially wanted to do or thought you wanted to do coming out?
Yeah, no, again, make it sound more glorious than it was. So, and this is, and when I talk to kids now about this kind of stuff, it really is so important. I wanted to be, I used to joke and say I wanted to be O.J. Simpson, only to the extent of he was. Let me finish that sentence. Don't stop me mid sentence now. That he was this great Hall of Fame football career, and then he became a broadcaster. I mean, that was and that was OJ we knew back then. And then when the football part for me started falling apart, that was less feasible. But also the thing that I tell young people, when we went to Stanford, I think I said I wanted to major in journalism, and Stanford at the time didn't even have a journalism degree. I mean, I hadn't even looked that deeply into it to know that.
Okay.
And once I found out that was the case, a lot of guys on the team were majoring in economics, so I ended up taking a class and said, okay. And I think I might have been trying to say, well, maybe I need to major in business, and of course Stanford didn't have a business degree either, so he kind of became the closest thing. And and it's funny too. I did not. I was one of those guys I could do well in school by kind of doing the basic work and doing the homework and coming. And then to get to Stanford, it became a whole different thing. It was much more difficult, and I did not have first kind of year of grades were reflective of the transition I was going through.
That first year transition, buddy.
Yeah,
it's real.
Well, but then when it became I had the famous meeting after spring ball with the head coach then, Jack Christensen, who said, I mean, you think about things they say to you as a kid. Here I am, a 18, 19-year-old kid, sophomore, and I go in excited about my end of spring ball meeting, thinking, yeah, I did okay. I might be second, might be third string. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I did okay. And he opens up. I'm the opening. I don't think I got a hell of anything. He said, you'll never start at Stanford University. Okay. Like, so whatever kind of, I think that's called abuse. Is that what they call that today? So
our transfer portal. Yeah.
Yeah. Transfer portal. Like, but then there, none of that stuff existed.
Right.
But it was, it was probably more of a runoff move. Let's get this guy scholarship against somebody else. And I remember saying, again, you asked me something else. I'm drifting. You let me just lay down on the couch and this is a psychological, you kind of bring me. So,
hey, you're in the circle of trust. Just let it go.
So he says, and may he rest in peace. He's gone, so he can't refute the way this conversation went. So he says, I said, I think I was just stunned. I may not say anything. So, and I think he actually used the word. So, so what are you going to do? And I said, and he said, you'll never start at center at Stanford University. I said, well, it sounds like I need to change positions. That was my response. And he said, you're not understanding what I'm saying. I said, no, I'm understanding. So I ended up switching to linebacker.
Linebacker,
at that point, yeah. And by the time I figured out how to play linebacker, but I'm graduating. By the time I figured it out, and it was time to be done. So that was kind of a pretty clear message in any event, even though I stayed out there for the money for the most part. And I ended up doing a lot of things that, a lot of guys chose not to do. Although at that time you kind of had the option to do it. I went to an overseas campus in lieu of spring ball and kind of summer training. But, as long as I showed up, so I showed up in the fall, and, it was a whole mess for kind of a couple of years of kind of being out there enough for them not to be able to take my stuff away. So, but that's what the transition, you can see in my transcript, you see the transition where I said, okay, this isn't gonna work. I better figure out this school thing. Mm-hmm. And so econ became the thing. And then it was a moment where athletes were starting to use lawyers as agents. I mean, it's kind of, you think about it, it really was starting to ramp up then. So I said, well, I could do that. So I ended up applying to law schools, and I ended up
not just any law school, but okay. Not just any law school, but okay, applying to law school.
And I wasn't something I thought about all my life, but so I ended up at Columbia, and the irony of that, Columbia was probably, you would think that I'd be thinking about Nebraska or Oklahoma or something like that. But if I hadn't gone to Stanford, I probably would have gone to Columbia. I'd gotten recruited there, as much as you get recruited to an Ivy school. And so I always in the back of my head, especially as football problems erupted, I said, man, if I went to Columbia, I'd probably be, and this is before Marcellus Wiley. This is before, anybody really had any success coming out of there. So I ended up going to the law school, and that was the story. And it really, and I'll tell you too, it was, once again, I wasn't the greatest law student either, but because I was still figuring out in some ways how to be that great student. And one of the things that athletes will tell you is, as soon as you stop playing, stop going to practice, you have a tremendous amount of time. Yeah. So I didn't really know how to study with that extra time or what to do with that extra in New York City.
Yeah, it wasn't studying that we did with that extra time. So
yeah, right. Because you're right, especially in my day, you'd have, after spring ball is over, you kind of had this window of nothing to do. So and usually my grades were better after spring ball was over with, but not always. But to have no practice at all, nothing in the way, was a whole new new phenomenon. So that's how I ended up in law school, and I went to law school specifically to find a way to work in sports.
Wow. Yeah, I don't want to get stuck in this part and hit it, but we talk about student athletes a lot and the benefits of college a lot on this show. And I guess the term student athlete has kind of evolved over time, obviously,
and changing a little bit more.
With new rules. So not get into that, but what is it about your upbringing and about your makeup kind of helped you recognize where you were at the time, athletically on the field? Sometimes that's a tough pill to swallow as a young athlete, but to make that transition into life, like, hey, I got to get these books done and I got to look at stuff beyond the field. What was in your makeup that allowed you to do that?
Yeah. Well, I still haven't swallowed it. I appreciate you thinking that I'm now mentally stable.
You on the couch all night tonight. Let's go. we about to unravel some things right now.
No, I can. You're 66, 7 years old, and I can still have that dream or wake up and think about if I had or what I could have done.
I'm telling you.
You hear me talking about Columbia. If I got into Columbia, well, Marcellus did it. Maybe I, found. I mean, so that's. I don't think that stuff ever goes away. But I will tell you that without question, it's my parents were huge on education. They were both HBCU lifers, Johnson C. Smith and Langston, and then my father and my mother was at Meharry for a while. So. Education was a big thing, so they were always on the kids. I joke about how successful I was not academically, but I did okay. I did the work, but I did not know how to study. That's really what I learned to do along the way, especially at Stanford. My and Dorsey was great. I mean, I know a lot of guys, Keyshawn, a lot of guys come out of Dorsey kind of over time. And Dorsey, I mean, I'm sure you guys know before Crenshaw was built, everybody kind of from that neighborhood went to Dorsey. Then Crenshaw was built, and then it kind of split off. But I mean, I grew up with Marcus Johnson and Wendell Tyler, kind of guys of that era. We were all in the same middle school, Audubon Junior High School. So a lot of people come. James Harden came out. A lot of guys still come out of that spot. But that's what it was. I mean, it was really I knew how important the academic piece was, and the idea of being successful and figuring a way to be successful, and the idea of what education can do. So I knew that. So, but I didn't exactly always know how to execute it the right way. So I was just trying to find that track, and I could probably give some credit to some old girlfriends or something that I was thinking about it. I don't know who's going to be watching this. So. But I can think, like the economics class, I can think about having problems with that, but the kind of help that I got from fellow African-American students too, that were more successful and said, this is how you do it. I remember I took a sociology class, me and a brother that I got to Dorsey with, the other guy, to go to Stanford that year. And we were in the sociology class freshman year. We didn't know what was going on. This guy was talking about stuff, theories, and we didn't know, they weren't handing out worksheets and stuff. This guy's just talking, and you're supposed to be watching everybody take notes. And we'd never sat in a class like that. And these two sisters came to us after class and said, "You brothers, how you doing?" We showed them the notes. They said, "No, this doesn't look like you have the right handle on stuff. Can you want to spend some minutes with us, and we'll tell you how to do this?" And I'll never forget. I tell students this all the time. They said, "Okay, this is going to be a lot of work, but let's start off with this. At the end of each class, write down the 3 things that you learned. You start with that, and then they expanded kind of from there. But I said, don't try to write down everything. Just start off with 3, and then expand from there." So it began to make a little bit more sense because these other students. So I'll tell you, it was parents for sure, and then the other African-American students that were there that were just a whole. They'd gone to all these prep schools and all these other places. And then there were, another core of guys and women like me that were trying to figure it out.
Just find that community, man.
Yeah,
awesome.
sure.
All right, so we want to jump into what we call in the game, talk about kind of what you're doing now, and we really want to, because it's funny, a lot of people haven't heard about the Global Sports Institute. So if you could just tell us, well, our listeners and us, how it started, and just what the overall goal for the institute is.
Yeah, well, it's 4 years new, so a lot of people may not have heard about it, and it's based at Arizona State University, funded by ASU and Adidas. So that's thus the Adidas Distinguished Professor title, which you said better than you did my last name, so I appreciate that. So how it started is maybe the most interesting part. So I mentioned Ray Anderson, and this is another story for kids. Ray, Ray was actually my host coming out of Dorsey. He was already at Stanford, and He was my host as I visited Stanford. So I met him, when I was, in high school. And Ray ended up going to Harvard Law School. I ended up going to law school. Years later, he calls me up. I'm at Wharton, still practicing a little law, and he says, I need to sell my sports agency. He had this big sports agency. Will you represent me in the sale to Octagon? So I did this work for him, and kind of out of the blue. Ray and I were in touch, but not on a regular basis. So then Ray ends up with a job at the Falcons, a chief administrative officer, and then the league calls him. And both those times he says, "Will you help me with my contract?" So, fast forward, guys, 25 years total later, he says, "Hey, I'm getting ready to leave the league. I'm looking at being the athletic director at Arizona State University. Will you negotiate my contract?" Yeah, sure. So in the process, I meet the president of Arizona State, and he says, inappropriately, he says, "What would it take to get you here?" And I said, "Man, I'm not coming to Arizona State." And so we finished Ray's deal all over. And a couple of weeks later, Ray called him and said, "No, that guy was serious. He wants you to think about coming down." I said, "I'm not going. What am I going to do in Arizona?" So the president calls me up again and says, "Well, I want you to whiteboard to think about what kind of sports research institute doesn't exist in the world. Whiteboard it, create it, and I don't care if you do it or not. I just want to know what it would look like. Come as a consultant, and we'll see what it goes." And it was almost a 2-3 year process of building this thing out. That the question became, what can the most impactful enterprise be that's a research focused sports institute? So we said, let's do things like ask questions like, is Gatorade better than water? Should your kid play with a concussion? Does the Rooney Rule work? Should your kids focus on one sport? Kind of all these kinds of questions that are there. And then if the research isn't being done at Arizona State, if we can't do it, where is it in the world that it can be done? And so we got this funding to do it. So through our publication, Global Sport Matters, you can find 4 years of these kinds of questions being answered and looked at. And we started doing bigger field studies. The initial plan was not to lean too heavy on race, but the leader leans on race a lot, so we end up talking about a lot of race issues. So we just have coming out a study on women's basketball coaches in college. Who are they? How they get there? What's a lot of the stuff we do is the shape of the river. What's it take to get there? And who gets there easiest? Who has the hardest time getting there? What are the differences in qualifications? So a lot of stuff on NFL head coaches. We just did a thing on MLB managers, to look at the idea of, I had written a book 25 years ago on in black and white, Race in Sports America, it's called. And at the time I wrote the book, there were 3 African-American managers in baseball 25 years ago. I think Cito, Dusty, and I forget who the third was at the time. And now here 25 years later, there's 2. I mean, it's just amazing to look at this stuff. But to see, especially back then, you had to be a major league player to be an African-American to manage in the league. So we looked at all those kinds of differences, and we're continuing to look at those differences as we do research. But that's what it is. We try to answer those questions. So it's research. We do educational stuff. To a lesser degree, we've done 2 years worth of a course called The Business of Basketball for the G League Ignite players up in Walnut Creek, all during the pandemic. But it's only a handful of players. But here the guys coming out of high school and talking to them about the business they're about to get into and understanding the business of sports and especially their business. And also, kind of backhandedly trying to give them exposure to college. If it doesn't work, college is not bad. You can do stuff like learn sports administration or something. So here's an entree for you. Here's a chance to get a credit. And then, you might be able to come back. And I'll tell you that 2 of the top draft picks were in that G League Ignite class. Yeah.
And playing very well, man. In your research, some of the questions that you brought up are, probably make people uncomfortable about some of the answers that you're coming up with. So how do you identify some of those questions that are uncomfortable to some? And I guess getting all the information out and finding those answers to those questions.
Yeah, well, that's part of the deal is to find out. I have a team of I don't know. We got about a dozen people that work at the institute now. Fullish time, and we have these brainstorming sessions trying to figure out what should we look at next. And we have an editorial calendar mapped out with these field studies and the kinds of things that we should look at going forward. So, so we've got basketball head coaches on the horizon. We're trying to figure out, some of these things are tougher to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
High school, some of the data is just impossible to get your arms around, but high school athletic directors, what impact does that have? I mean, one of the questions we want to go further on, which we all think we know the answer to, is if there's a Black college president and a Black athletic director, are you more likely to have Black head coaches in the bigger sports or not? I think we all have an assumption that's what you don't have the Black president or Arizona State, but you have the athletic director, and then you've got Herm, that's the head football coach, and then we mentioned Stanford. You got Black athletic director. You got David Shaw there, and Maryland. So there's some evidence that there is something to it. But what about women? If you got a woman in charge, what does that do? That whole affinity issue, and it's, as we try to find other ways to explore those kinds of issues, besides uncovering, Washington football team emails to see what's really going on.
I love it.
You?
I do. I wanted to follow up on that, man, because I
saw it.
Yeah. There was something that you said I saw in the interview earlier about athletes being paid in sports and college athletes, and how you would like to see some of the focus shift to athletes completing their degree.
Right.
With the rules changing now that they're able to, name, image, and likeness. I guess just where's your stance on it, and how's that sentiment for you still?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a problem, in my adult, more knowledgeable life with athletes, college athletes being paid or receiving some form of compensation, and nothing wrong with it. The first book I wrote was called Agents of Opportunity, and this was when I was really, I'd gone from this kind of not so much of a student to really, I was buried in the library all the time. And when I got to Penn, somebody said, well, to get tenure, you got to write, you can say obscure stuff, but you got to write books, you got to do research. I said, okay. My wife was in training to be a physician. She's doing an internship, an anesthesiologist. She's up early in the morning, just me and her. We had one car. So I'd go in, 5:30 in the morning. I'm reading all this stuff. So I found myself in the Penn Museum has a library, and in there they had books on ancient Greece. And there was a book in there by this guy, David C. Young. It's called The Ancient Myth of Greek Amateur Athletics. And I started reading the book. And this is before everybody had really called out amateurism. Sometimes I get, I say, wait a minute, I found this. I didn't find it first, but I always be ahead of some of these other folks that are claiming it now. This is 1988. I'm reading this up, and he says, not only did ancient Greek athletes receive payment for victory in sport via gold wreaths, amphoras of oil. So it goes through all this whole list of stuff. He has these charts in there, charts talking about the value of these things back then. And I'm reading this stuff, 6 a.m. and then he has this line in there. It says, not only did they get paid for everything, that there was no such thing as a amateur moment or Olympics where there was no compensation. He said, as a matter of fact, in ancient Greek, there is no word for amateurism. So I read that. I said, wow, this is something. So I actually called this guy up. I'm sure he's passed away now. This is part of research. So let me talk to this guy. Yeah. And I said, well, man, why did you do, everybody else is saying amateurism is this purity and this and that. Why did you write this? And he said, kind of crazy line, but things you remember. He said, because I got tired of seeing all this blamed on all those poor dead Greeks. I said, okay, well, I'm not worried about the poor dead Greeks, but I remember him saying that, and I said, okay, well, I'm gonna stick with this. So as I started doing more and more work on it, so I wrote that book to talk about it was okay for athletes to receive some greater compensation, because at the time the biggest problem in college sports was probably the corruption with agents. And part of the thought was that agents are able to provide money to athletes because the opportunity is there to do so, agents of opportunity. So if you could somehow provide some resources to them, this could kind of squash this not even legal activity, it's against the NCAA rules activity, what's going on.
Right.
So that was kind of the journey that got me to this whole place of for sure, it's okay to provide compensation. And it's probably a good thing. And I think we're seeing some of that with NIL. You know, it's all going to play out. You know, I think we can jump the gun and call it too soon, but it's just, you know, just open up the marketplace. It's providing an opportunity for, you know, folks that want to make some more money to make some. I heard the average, you know, income on men and women getting in, it's like $36 right now. So it's not a big deal, but some people are figuring a way to make a big deal, and it'll be a bigger deal for some. But if it's $36 that they didn't have what's wrong with that? Yeah,
for sure.
All right, MH, you want to hit him with the quick hits?
Yes, sir. So, Ken, a time that you were starstruck, if ever.
Oh, you know, one's tellable. Oh, you know, be careful about Ali for sure. Ali for sure.
Oh, that's a dope.
And
awesome.
You know, and I, you know, in the same place with him a few times, but really had a closer encounter with him at the '84 Olympics, and he was just clowning with me. I ran the boxing competition, and what was that, 27, 28 years old. So, you know, we had all this kind of lightweight security compared to what we had today. And I got a call on the radio, think about that, saying, "Hey, we got a problem at the front gate." So I go to the front gate, and I see Don King, hair kind of everywhere, waving American flag.
In America.
Big kind of, entourage of people, and they're just walking in. And think about that. It's, you know, it's before all this crazy stuff. But in the midst of the crowd, here's Ali. I mean, so they're walking in with Ali. And I will tell you, you know, you think about moments when you hesitate. I'm sure I hesitate, whatever I could have done to stop this onslaught. So Ali's standing behind me, says, "Hey, you security?" You know, the way, I'm not gonna do my impersonation, but you security. And I turn around and he's gone. I mean, you know, he's old guy, but he moved around. So his job apparently was to distract the head guy. So then he does a little thing with his, again, I can't see him, in fingers in my ears, kind of, and you know how you turn. He said, "What was that noise?" I turn, he's gone again. The next time I turn around, and he's right in front of me, and he says, "Hey, brother, it's me, Ali." and I still don't know what to say. I said, "Ali is messing with me." And next thing I know, I mean, again, a whole lot of circumstances. This entourage led by Don King, they make their way down to the front row, and they're all seated at ringside. And to this day, I still don't know, why were these seats open? How did this happen? So that's probably the one story I should stick with. I won't go. But you know, you see, starstruck. I think that's really what it was in that moment. Yeah,
that's definitely one.
Yeah.
A favorite book, and why did that book speak to you?
Man, I'll tell you most recent book. So one of my favorites, because I can go on and on books, and it's not even that recent, but it just resonates, and I end up recommending it a lot. But the warmth of Other Suns, the Isabel Wilkerson book about the migration of African Americans, from the South to the North, and there's one story in particular in the book about a brother that finds his way to LA. So as I read that story, I think about my family and how they found their way from the. But there's the great line in there that I I use a lot. I give her complete credit for it. And you think about all that we as a people were going through to decide to get out of those places that you'd been to forever. Mm-hmm. And she writes, sometimes the best form of protest is just to leave. I mean, you're so deep that sometimes the best form of protest is just to leave. And that's what so many of those folks did, just got out. And that ultimately sometimes that's what you have to do.
Wow. Nice.
Wow. So for somebody that's done a lot in sports, do you have a bucket list or something that you want to accomplish that you haven't done or that you want to do?
No.
Here it is next.
That's good. No. I've been to Wimbledon, U.S. Open, Super Bowl, World Series. So all that kind of stuff is pretty covered. And I'm not, I'm told the Ali story, but meeting people is not, unless they're good people, you're just going to have a good time with them. But I've always want to meet somebody. I don't have that either. So, I'm like, I'm not like, but I think about, like Jackie Robinson's last public words. I mean, you just want to see more of us in positions of power. That's what I want to see in sports is, I don't know how we do it now. The franchises cost so much, but more African-American ownership. I mean, that's one thing that I've been trying to do some work with. I don't have the money to do it, but is there a way or is there, somebody with the money that would has that aspiration that we can get more? Because that's the ultimate, to me, that's ultimate answer to so many of these questions. If it happens, we can't just rely on, one Bob Johnson couldn't do it all himself, and whatever unique issues he has, and Magic has kind of a different kind of role where he is. But if we had more of a presence and we're in more of those rooms, I think less of this foolishness that happens would happen.
Absolutely.
Give me a favorite food that you probably couldn't live without.
Well, that's probably harder than favorite book or. Oh man, and when you think about favorite food, you think I go almost immediately to food my mother made.
Yeah, and macaroni and cheese.
And so, I thought you were asking me.
Yeah, he started having flashbacks. He's already thinking about Thanksgiving and
Thanksgiving. But and I almost never eat it now either. And excuse me, almighty race. I'm not trying to set us back, but I'm gonna say it out loud. I mean, fried chicken. Let's be honest.
And then one of us will turn it down right now.
At all.
That's it, mate.
Yeah, last one, and you might have already touched on it. Your favorite historical sports figure.
Yeah. You know what? There's the new one emerging with me. I mean, Ali is the easy one, but there's this brother Octavius Cato, and I think he died in 1871. But he was a Negro leaguer, and I've been trying to figure out, this whole thing about who was the first athlete to protest about, social kinds of issues.
Okay.
And he was a Philadelphian, and he's a real activist in terms of voting rights. And I got to, so you're catching me midstream and learning more about him, but. If I have it right, he got killed in protesting for voting rights in Philly, and they erected a statue in Philly of this guy Octavius Cato, and I just want to find out more about him because I'm always trying to think of the first. Sometimes I say Jack Johnson's the first one. He kind of protested. He's free, I'm dating white women. I'm doing all the stuff I want to do. So he's kind of protesting by virtue of being free. But I think this brother might be somebody to take a close look at.
That's awesome. All right, so I want to jump into the winner's circle, man. This is where we talk about, some of the things you got going on, and I mean, you do have a lot. You touched quickly on the women's in college basketball, and you actually have something coming up soon. I mean, you already started the research, but do you want to just kind of briefly highlight that and what you guys are doing with that research?
Yeah, so that research is coming out, and I think it's maybe it's next week. I should have this. I'm coming on a show. I should have all my information in front of me. But we're doing we call them GSM lives. So we're doing a live conversation with some great leaders in women's basketball about the study and about what's going on there. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. And we kind of do that combination of things. We do these studies, and then we have these conversations about them and try to have an impact in that kind of way. But ultimately, we put out these things that are called, best practices, trying to make sure people know what's going on. We've got 2 polls that'll be coming out pretty soon. One of them's on name, image, and likeness, and what do people think about it now that it's underway? And kind of same kind of questions you were asking me about. Are you still really not happy with athletes getting compensation? We got one which it's taken us a long time to try to analyze this, but very interesting questions. A poll that we conducted that look at does a team's engagement in terms of hiring diverse people, Black, Hispanic, whatever, in as front office people, taking tickets, as vendors and otherwise. If you know about that kind of stuff, does that influence your affinity to the team? Are you more likely to spend money with the team if you know they're doing the right thing in that space, or do you stay away from a team if they're not? So we're trying to figure out ways to explore that question with a national poll. And part of it is, some of what we do when we look at these things is, we know that everybody's not down with the moral case for increasing the presence of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So we also try to provide for those who need it, the business case.
Business, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then just kind of a question on that. Are you looking to a lot of the female basketball coaches are all men, Is that part of the study as well?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's, the great work that somebody did right after Title IX passed. There's a guy he's a professor down at University of New Mexico Law School, a brother, Alfred Mathewson. He wrote this law review article not too long after that. Greatest title in the world. I forget what the whole title was, but it was the last piece of it was the function at the junction, right? And basically what he was saying was, you got this new law in place and you thought it was going to help women, but guess who's the number one recipient of the benefits of having more women's basketball teams where somebody's getting paid? It's white men. And then guess who's second? It's white women. And guess who's being left behind at the junction? It's Black women. So just all these years later, and that's kind of what our study looks at, and it is very much the same thing. So and why is that? What are the different qualifications? Well, one thing that we found in this women's basketball study, in athletic director studies we've looked at to see who gets the job and why, is that overwhelmingly Black women have more degrees, more doctorates, and that sort of stuff before they get these jobs than anybody else. I mean, they're the most overqualified before they can get the job. So that's something to, I think, put out there more so people know. And if we give anybody the benefit of the doubt that's doing this kind of hiring, is to say, I'm not a big believer in unconscious bias, but to say, hey, have an awareness that this is what's going on. That if you're looking for the Black woman to have a PhD and you let the white guy come with a high school diploma and a lot of experience,
right,
you're doing something wrong. You need to look for Black women that have that same level of experience as well.
Oh, that definitely makes sense. So something we've done on the show, and we we were kind of doing a series, when certain topics come on, and I've seen you've done variations of it through the Institute, but we do segments called State of the Black Athlete. And as a general question to you, where do you think we are state of the Black athlete, right? And I know there's so many topics of angles you could go, but just, I guess, encapsulate maybe an overall, like, where do you think we are currently?
Overall, definitely in a better place than we've ever been. It's kind of an interesting moment, though, to ask that question, because also, especially with college athletes, I am wondering, we had all this activity, last year plus, even before George Floyd, but certainly post George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And just wondering how much of that activity has been squashed because these men and women are saying, I don't want to mess up my NIL. I mean, how many of them are doing kind of a modern day Jordan kind of move on not being that engaged and stuff? So I think it's too early to tell, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. Right, the way to get paid is to be raceless and apolitical. That's kind of the oldest model. Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. That's kind of so it's nothing. We're not doing anything unique. But I do think that led by LeBron, kind of showing the way on, if you are successful, you can step up and continue to get paid. There is a good model for, and everybody may not agree with everything he does or says for whatever reason. Many people still don't like the way, him to win for whatever reason.
Right.
But I think he's really been a great model in terms of, like, this is the level you can get to. And it's, and I think we got, the one other thing that I think is a new day that we do need to watch. And I hope it goes on a positive path and doesn't turn out to be something negative, is, and I'm an advisor to some of these things too. It is the Overtime Elite. It is the Team Ignite and the G League. It's all these new opportunities for high school players. And, and I remind people, for anybody that kind of flinches right away when I say it, I mean, the Overtime Elite is right 27 guys. And I, I'm confident there's 27 guys in the world who should take the shot to have this be the path for their life. But Overtime Elite, if it stays structured the way it is, you're getting an education while you're focused on the sport you want to do. And then you've got, $100,000 waiting to get you through college, if that's what it turns out is the right thing for you.
Mm-hmm. The MLB, obviously the World Series just wrapped up. I know you guys are doing studies on the MLB. And what are some of the futures that you see as far as having more Black managers, just the game being, I guess, more, popular in our communities? What's the future of the MLB?
Yeah, I'm not optimistic, and I'm not optimistic because, for a lot of reasons. I mean, and I think we all have many of them in our minds when we think about baseball.
Yes.
When we watch this World Series, we try to figure out, is there a single African American on the field to play? Is there another brother there besides Dusty? At 72,
Right.
and it's so much happens before you can get there and get to the level where you can actually make it to the majors. I've done some work with Major League Baseball in years past, and talked to a lot of these guys about making that decision to play baseball, which is more the exception, that you come to that point in high school where you get this football scholarship. Now you can get NIL and all this sort of stuff, and mama wants you to go to school, as opposed to going to play in the backwoods somewhere for a few years, even if you're one of the lucky ones to get a nice size bonus, which can kind of steer you that way. But what's happening with baseball is the kind of training that's required now is like tennis and golf. And it's just not what it used to be. The first couple of dozen African-American Hall of Famers were all, Mays, Alabama, and Hank Aaron, a couple were from the South, but most of them were from big cities. And in those big cities, we don't have the diamonds and baseball programs anymore like we did when they were there. I mean, so if you find ways to bring baseball back, maybe it can develop some more. But I think that at the heart of it, you don't have the kind of activity that you need to have going on at the MLB headquarters. At one point I was able to highlight, and I think I may be able to start doing it again, that they don't have the page. They may have the page now, and I need to go back and look at it. They used to have a page talking about the C-suite at Major League Baseball. And for a long period of time before we started calling them out, it was all 40, 50, 60-year-old white men. And then they moved Tony Regan's up in there, who's in charge of baseball development. They brought in a woman who's no longer there, so she's not there anymore, African-American woman. And there's another white woman that's up in there now to diversify it a little bit. But it's just, to say the things that you said is Rob Manfred about the tomahawk chop and local markets and this and that, and not just recognize it's racist and do the appropriate things to try to move forward, and to have an organization like the Braves, which is unfortunate. I mean, I was kind of watching the last couple of games that were there when you had chop this and chop that, and they kind of embraced that whole thing there, which, if you're really serious about making it more attractive to diverse people, you move away from that kind of stuff. So I think baseball to me is in so many ways at the bottom rung of the, if we think of the big 4 or 5 sports, baseball's it's a sport that's gone from the high of 19% African Americans, and now we're down to 7%. Not that we have to play sports, but if something's wrong if there's been that much decline.
Absolutely. All right, so wrapping it up here, this is where we call the assist or the coaching gym. This is where you can share like a life philosophy, words you live by, or something you would tell your younger self. But just leave us with the coaching gym.
Lift everybody up. I mean, reach back and lift up. Just I know how fortunate I am to have the success that I've had. I'm in trying as I'm still out here doing stuff to bring along is many folks that might not traditionally get the opportunity as I can. And at the same time try to treat other folks the right way too, which you can't. I don't think you'd have a kind of a consciousness to harass people like Major League Baseball if you're not trying to do right yourself, even in your own little world. I don't have the same power that they have, but trying to do right within that.
I love it. MH, final thought?
Mr. Ken, man, thank you for lifting us up and being a part of this show, man. This has been an absolutely pleasure to speak with you. I probably could feel like I could talk to you for 2 more hours, man. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the books, man.
I know.
Like 12 books out there we need to get in touch. So, definitely, as time progresses, maybe we can have you back on. We would love to have you back on. And just definitely want to thank Mr. Kenneth Shropshire. Let's go. And we want to thank the people for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. New shows drop every Thursday. Please subscribe to us on YouTube because visual representation matters. Subscribe and listen to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And please stay safe, practice gratitude, and know we're rooting for you.
Screaming, all us blacks got is sports and entertainment until we even.
Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade new rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap and back.